I'm attempting to complete every single GameCube game, and I'm using a random number generator to pick the next game. Last episode, we shot our way through Chaos Field, and in this episode, we're going to collect robots and take down an evil scientist in Cubix Robots For Everyone Showdown. Cubix Robots For Everyone Showdown was released on June 2nd, 2003, and was developed by Blitz Games and published by the 3DO company. This game has such a strange battle system, but it ended up being enjoyable. Before we get started, make sure to like this video because it helps out the channel, and subscribe if you're new, so that you don't miss any of the future games. Without further ado, this is my experience with Cubix Robot For Everyone Showdown. In Cubix Robots For Everyone Showdown, we're going to go through the story mode to consider this one complete. This will follow the story of the game, but before we get into the story mode, we have to pick what main character we're going to use. We can pick between Connor and Abby. I don't know either character from the animated series that this is based on, so I decided to just use Connor. I don't think this really changes anything in the game. Maybe some of the robots we can collect along the way, but I'm not too sure. This game opens with a cutscene of an evil scientist known as Dr. K. He was a former scientist for Rubik's Corp, and he's going to be the main villain in the game. We see him in his lair collecting Solex. It then explodes and gets released into the world. Solex has the power to corrupt robots, causing them to behave differently in an almost evil way. It doesn't explain how this all works, but this is what leads into the plot of the game. If you don't know, this game is an RPG with turn-based fights, but outside of the battle, it's a platformer where we go around and collect robots that can fight for us, sort of like in a Pokemon-like style. I'll go more into the battle system when we get there, but for now, we get to control Connor and complete some chores for our parents. This teaches us about moving around, jumping, and solving the various puzzles that this game will throw at us. The first puzzle just has us putting away boxes in the garage so that our dad can put the car in there. It's extremely simple. But before that, we meet the two main characters that we will have contact with during the game. First is Abby, the other character that we could have played as, and then Hella. She works at the robot repair shop and acts as the tutorial for the early parts of the game. We can also reach out to her throughout the game to repair our robots when they take damage in battles. Once completing the box moving puzzle in the garage, we head over to Abby's house to check on a robot that is acting unusual. But before we find it, we come across a robot by the name of Maximix. This robot will teach us about the battle system in the game. I'm just going to explain it here because it takes forever to learn it from this robot. When battling, we have a party of 3 robots that we can take into battle with us. Each robot has its own element attached to it, and some elements are super effective against others. Again, think of Pokemon. We can then pick from an aggressive attack, standard attack, or defensive attack, and there is some strategy to this, but let's explain how the attacking works first. When attacking, we have to spin a wheel and hope we land on the blue areas of the wheel to successfully land the attack. It's a timing thing that doesn't really work that well, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. Each time we land a successful attack in a row, we'll do more damage, but the wheel will have less and less blue areas for us to land on, making it way harder. I found out that attacking aggressive on your first turn, and then attacking defensively on later turns can help because if we miss, then the enemy can't attack us for free. Since we have a smaller chance of landing on the attack, the more successful attempts we get. I would attack defensively when I thought I was going to miss so that I would take less damage from the enemy's attack. I hope that kinda makes sense. When attacking, we get bonus points, and once we fill up the meter, we get a CPU chip. These are the items in this game that we can use in battle. This can include things like shields, health regen, stealing health, flipping the wheel so that the blue and red switch, and double damage, among some other things. Using these chips at the right time can change the outcome of any fight, and actually end up being pretty important. Now let's talk about the elements. There are a total of 5 types in this game: power, electric, water, fire, and radiation, and it's shown using symbols next to the robot's name. Some elements will be super effective and some will do very little damage, but it does show you this from the menu before each turn. To give an example, water is strong against electric, so having a robot with the type advantage will make things easier. Alright, I think that's the basic idea of the battle system. It doesn't get much more complicated than that from here on out, so that's basically it. Once we defeat a robot in battle, it will join us and we can use them to fight with. They can level up with fights, but honestly getting the next robot is usually the better choice because it's almost always better than the one we're currently using. We have Cubix to start out with, and he's going to stay with us throughout the game because he ends up being super good, and it's actually Connor's best friend. After doing the tutorial, we get another robot that is just a lawnmower, and in this fight we learn about the type differences. I already went over this, so we're not going to talk about it again. One thing I do want to point out though is the battles in this game can take a while because of all the RNG that comes with spinning the wheel. So I'm going to skip all of the small battles and just talk about the boss fights in the game. At the end of Abby's house, we find the robot that is freaking out, and we have to fight it to make it go back to normal. Not a hard fight by any means, but it does advance the plot. After winning the fight, we come across another robot, but before we can help it, a giant gray robot comes down and steals it. The robot is controlled by Dr. K, and we call Hella to find out what we should do. We find out that she's received a bunch of phone calls about how robots all over Bubbletown are freaking out, and she sends us there to help out. We're moving to the next area of the game now. When we get to Bubbletown, we get another cutscene where we meet up with our two friends, Mog and Chip. They agree to help us, and then we call Hella. She then explains what happened to the robots being hit with Solex, and we need to go around and save the robots before they hurt themselves or anyone else. And then we're free to go around the area. Each area in the game is broken into smaller sections, and there are puzzles that we need to solve to save the robot in each area. Along the way, we can find items such as batteries that will allow for us to heal the robots, battery upgrades that let us carry more battery power with us, like on our personal self, and Cubix parts. There are 5 Cubic parts in each area, and if we collect them all, we get another version of Cubix, which is usually just a different type and a different form. This is why Cubix stays in our party most of the game. The Cubic parts are very hard to miss along the way, and you just end up getting most of them from completing the puzzles in the area. If you notice in the bottom left of the screen, it shows donuts. These are how much health Connor has. We can lose these from failing a puzzle and falling into water, running into a robot that we can't save, and things like that. There are floating donuts everywhere that we can collect to regain health, so this never ends up being an issue when playing the game. I don't really know why they added this at all. It feels very pointless. After collecting all of the Cubic chips in Bubbletown, we unlock the fire version, which sort of looks like a jet. Then we collected all the other robots in the area, increased our overall battery collection, and moved to the final section of Bubbletown. This is where we're going to face our first boss of the game. When we get there, we find one last robot that is corrupted from Solex before we're attacked by one of Dr. K's robots, Catastrophe. It's a giant crab robot that moves around on what looks like a unicycle. The interesting thing about boss fights with Dr. K is that the robot is broken into 3 parts of different types. We have to take out all 3 parts to win the fight, and these end up being the only challenging fights in the whole game. Catastrophe is made up of power, electric, and radiation, and all the boss fights in the game will have a good mix of what we're going to deal with when fighting them, so that we're dealing with different things throughout the game. I will point out that the boss fights are way longer than anything else in the game, like way longer. This fight alone took me around 7 minutes to complete. I don't really know how to explain these fights because it's still the same battle system, but I'll try my best. Dr. K leads with his electric portion, which ends up being a bad matchup for Cubix, and we start with just 7 damage because he used a shield as well. We hit our second attack, and I went with fire again because I figured he would change, but he didn't, so we just do more damage, but still isn't very effective. I want to point out here that it was nice that this game gave each robot different attacks instead of it always just being the same. I couldn't imagine watching the same attack over and over again when playing it. I think each one has 4 different moves that they can perform, making it so much better to play. On our third attack, we're able to land on the wheel again and hit for massive damage on the radiation section, taking it out in one hit with a 49 damage attack. Now we don't have to worry about radiation anymore. When we defeat a section of the robot, it shows Dr. K pulling his hair out, like large clumps of hair. This dude is going to be bald by the end of this game. Or by the end of this fight, actually. Why is he doing this? Please stop! On the next turn, Dr. K uses the virus chip that makes the wheel spin. This causes it to be much harder to land on the blue, but somehow we got it and landed our 4th hit in a row on his power section, doing a whopping 33 damage and taking out most of its health. This luck is going to dry up soon. I know it. On our next turn, we miss and take a huge hit, causing 36 damage and almost taking out Cubix Jet in one turn. We definitely need to be careful now. On the next turn, I switch to Aquatic, and unfortunately, he hits us with double damage and does a massive 70 damage to him to take him out in one hit. The next turn, we used a health restore chip on Cubix Jet, but we still take the hit. It only does 27 damage, so we stayed alive again with only 2 health left. This was a great decision on my end to keep us in the fight. Next turn, we switch to Cerbrex, and Dr. K misses, allowing for us to counter and take out his electric section with a 32 damage turn, turning the fight into our hands with a 2v1. We hit on our next turn with Cerbrex and end the fight with a 45-point hit on his last section. We beat the first boss fight of the game. It was close, but we got it done. Even though we win, in the next cutscene, the robot we were going to save still gets stolen, and Chip chases after him. Dr. K then threatens the robot from earlier to help him or he'll harm us. Ella tells us that she might be able to track where Dr. K is located, but until then we need to help more robots. Mong leaves to look for Chip, and we find ourselves at the construction site for the next area of the game. This area isn't anything crazy, just what I would picture a construction site. This area has more puzzles to complete, but isn't really different than the first one. We can get some new robots in this area though, so that will help us make our team stronger for the next boss fight. After collecting all the Cubix chips in this construction area, we get another type. This one is water, and it's called the hover tank, which is exactly what you would think it is. Once completing the area, we find one last robot, a robot that looks like a magnet on a spring, but before we can help it, we're attacked by Dr. K again. But this time with a new robot called Clobber. Clobber is a purple robot that has arms and hands, but he flies around using engines that look like they would be on an airplane. Clobber is made up of 3 sections, with the types being radiation, fire, and power. A little different than the last fight we had with Dr. K. This fight is way more difficult too, and I actually did lose on my first attempt at it. So let's dive into this one and see how the second attempt went. On our first turn in this fight, we attack and land on the blue section of the wheel, but Dr. K uses an invert wheel chip, causing us to miss the attack and get hit with a huge attack for 31 damage on Directic. Not a great way to start this fight. On Dr. K's next turn, he lands the attack on Directic. I decided to use a shield and I thought I would be safe, but he used unblockable, so we take 12 damage and we lost our first robot in the fight. We're in bad shape early. We're going to need to change the tide soon. On Dr. K's next turn, he misses, which gives us a chance to attack with Heroic. It's not a great matchup, but we get a solid 19 damage on the power section of Clobber. Now we're on the attacking side of things, and we bring out Cubix, and are able to land a nice hit on his fire section for 27 damage. If we can chain some attacks together, I think we'll be good to win this fight. Dr. K attempts to hit us with Virus, so we miss our attack, but we got lucky and landed the attack. Unfortunately, however, we hit the radiation section of his robot, and we were electric, so we weren't very effective against it. We miss our next attack, but I planned for this and used a shield on this attack, allowing for us to only take 7 damage. This game seems simple on the surface, but during these boss fights, it's important to use strategy to keep yourself in the fight. On Dr. K's next turn, he's able to land a hit for 25 on us, and he also heals his robot. So now we're yet again in some trouble. The next turn really helps us in this fight. We bring out Heroic and we heal so that we can get some health back. But we didn't even take the hit because he misses the attack, and we get to counter with a huge 39 damage attack on his fire section, taking him out. It's now 2v2. On our next turn, we land our attack and do 27 damage on his power section, which was nice because if he would have used radiation, we wouldn't have done anything to it. This was a gamble on my end, and it ended up paying off. We miss the next turn and take just 15 damage, which isn't good, but we stay alive for now. His next turn, he decides to use double damage and lands the hit for 50 damage on Heroic. Heroic has 51 health, so we survived with 1 HP. This is the skin of our teeth. This was so lucky because I think a higher attack roll and we would have lost our power robot for this fight. Using some strategy on our next turn, I figured he was going to land his attack, so I used our inverted wheel chip, and it paid off nicely. We were able to land a hit on his power section and take it out with an attack for 41 damage. We have one more section of Clobber left, but both of our robots are on very low health. We get our next attack and got 19 damage. This cut the radiation section's health in half. We need to land one more attack and we will win this fight. Let's hope that we can get it. Unfortunately, we miss our next attack, but we only take 7 damage because I decided to use a shield to protect ourselves. This is going to come down to the very end for this fight. We take the next hit with Heroic because he only had 1 health anyways, and he takes us out. We're down to a 1v1 fight, and the first robot to land an attack will win the fight. The pressure is on now. We get really lucky and he misses his next attack, but with our damage roll, we only get 18 damage, leaving him on 1 health. We have to land the next hit or we lose. It's all down to this. We barely got it into the blue section of the wheel, but we were able to win the fight with 5 health left, and we only did 9 damage on the last attack. This was extremely close, and we almost lost this fight for the second time. Once we win the fight, we get another cutscene where Dr. K is able to bot nap the robot we were going to try and save. We can't catch a break with these fights. We call Hella to see if she's had any luck tracking Dr. K down. She tells us that he's blocking her communications, but she's working on it. We think he might be near a charging station and then head to the next area of the game. We talk to Hella when we arrive, and she tells us that more and more robots are being affected by the Solex, and we need to be careful when attacking the robots in this area. The next area is called Bubble Town Main Square. This area is a bunch of arcade-like areas branching off of a hedge maze. It's a pretty simple design and a simple area to get through quickly, and nothing really happens during it. We get the next cubic robot form and then find ourselves at the end of the area where there is a robot that looks like a stove or something, and this one is the one that we need to save. But guess what? We're attacked by Dr. K again, but this time we have to face his robot called Contraption. This one is a giant bug-looking thing with helicopter blades on the top of its head, using them to fly around, I guess. All these designs are so goofy looking, but it keeps it fresh even though every area just has the same thing happen in it. Contraption is another 3 robot fight, but this time we have to deal with radiation, water, and power. I think it's funny how they just change one of the elements each time instead of making them all different. This is going to be another super long fight, so let's see how this one went, because the last one was way too close. Before the fight, I looked at the new Cubic form. It's called Excavator, and this is Cubix Radiation form. It's a giant drill, so I actually really like the design. For this fight, I went with the team of Soix, Excavator, and Vendix. covering the elements of electric, radiation, and power. This time we should have the advantage because of the typing, but we'll see how it goes. On our first turn, we miss the first attack and take a huge 30 damage attack. So yet again, we start this one off in not good shape. This robot has a ton of health, so we can't miss on these easy turns or we're not going to stand a chance. On his next turn, we heal Vendex, and Dr. K uses double damage, hitting us for 44 damage, leaving us on 3 health with Vendex. If I wouldn't have healed him, we would have lost him though, so that was cool. On the next turn, I tried to use Virus to get him to miss, but he's able to land the attack, but since we had the type advantage in this matchup, we only took 11 damage on this turn. Not bad. Finally, we get him to miss on his next turn, and we counter with a super effective 45 damage to his power section of the robot, the one with the most health. We hit our next turn even though Dr. K uses his virus chip on us. We didn't have a great matchup though, and we only landed 10 damage on the radiation section of the robot. On my next turn, I expected to miss the attack, so I planned for this and used my shield chip to protect our electric robot, and it ended up working out. Because he had the type advantage and landed a hit, that would have taken us out for sure, but this ended up only doing 15 damage with the shield. He hits us on the next turn, but yet again, we guessed right, and his attack was ineffective and only did 11 damage to us. I'm getting lucky guessing what type he's going to use in this fight. On his next turn, we got super lucky, and he missed his attack, allowing for us to counter with a huge 29 damage, almost taking out the power section. On our next turn, we land an attack with Vendex, which has been on the edge of being defeated for the entire fight. We land 25 damage attack on it, which is always solid. On our next turn, we miss our attack and just take enough damage to lose Vendex for the fight. This ended up being the best thing to happen because we could have lost our other stronger robots if we would have picked them instead. On Dr. K's next turn, he hits us for 8 damage, so I wasn't worried about it. On his next turn, he does hit us again for very little damage, but the problem is that he healed himself this time, flipping the fight around yet again. I was thinking at this point that I was going to lose the fight, but on Dr. K's next turn, he missed his attack, and we counter with a huge attack on his power section for 39 damage. This ended up being enough to take it out, and we evened the playing field. On our next turn, we landed a perfect attack on the radiation section of Contraption. It ended up taking it out with a solid 40 damage. In 2 turns, we flipped this battle completely around, which I wasn't expecting it at all. We land our next attack, but it's only for 28 damage, which isn't enough to take out the boss for good. I thought I was going to miss the next attack because of how high the chain was, but we ended up getting lucky and I landed the next attack, giving us the last attack we needed to win the fight. This was a tough fight, but at the end, we were able to flip the tide, and then it ended up just working out for us on our first try. Once we finish the fight, we get another cutscene where Cubix gets hit with like an EMP or something. It's an electric-based thing, and he gets knocked out. Then Contraption takes both the robot we were going to save and Cubix, and then he flies away. Chip and Mong show up and tell us that they think they know where Dr. K's lair is. We follow them back to the scrapyard, and we begin our search of the area. When we get to look around this area, I found it funny that they said they think it's his lair, but the scrapyard is called Dr. K's scrapyard. Wouldn't this be the first place to look if it was called that? Unless we're the ones that just call it that and not everyone else? But I guess I'm not too sure. It just made me laugh. When we arrive, we're just in the scrapyard section with cars and puzzles, nothing special. Then we move to an area with a bunch of jumps and water. Once at the end of this area, we get our 200 battery capacity, and then I look through all of my robots at this point. We have most of them now, it seems like, just a few more to complete the robot decks. The next area is called the bottom of the tower, and we have to push this cart around to get the items from the area where the floor is starting to give out. Once that's completed, we take an elevator to the next area called the tower shaft, where we have to avoid these lasers and ride on blocks that move back and forth. In this area, we're able to grab the last Cubix chip we need to get his final form. We collected all the Cubix forms now. This leads us to the Solex lab, where we have to plug all the pipes that are shooting out Solex. Nothing too interesting happens in this area. Once that's completed, we head up to Dr. K's control room. This is an area where we have to platform our way across the room, jumping over lasers and using blocks to activate lifts. It's time consuming, but it isn't all that challenging. When we finally get to the end, we can activate another elevator and make our way up to the final room, where we will have a fight with Dr. K. We get a cutscene where Dr. K is sitting in the bucket lift on his robot, and he tells us that he's installed a chip called the Negatizer. This makes Cubix think that friends are foes and foes are friends. And now he's evil, and we have to fight Cubix to try to save him. Dr. K also tells us that it's Cubix with a K now, because every robot he makes starts with a K instead of a C. That's just his thing. This fight isn't that bad because it's just Cubix. He does have 50 power, so he's very strong. And we don't have Cubix to fight with, so that puts us at a disadvantage. So we're going to have to come up with a team to try to take him out. The team I decided on was Extinguish, Acoustic, and Soix. It's a good mix of types, and I think they're strong enough to take Cubix out with little to no issue. Let's see how this fight went. Cubix also has a massive amount of health at 150, so it's going to take a while to take him out. On the first turn, Dr. K uses an invert wheel on us, so we miss our first attack, taking a huge 25-point hit on Extinguish, basically taking him out of the fight for now. On the next turn, we take a hit from Dr. K, but I planned type advantage on this turn, and Cubix only did 12 damage to us, so it ended up not being a big deal. He lands on the next turn too, and this does enough damage to take out Acoustic. So we're down to 2 robots in 3 turns, and we lost our type advantage against Cubix. Dr. K attacks us again, and since I figured he would miss because of how small the wheel was, I went with our strongest robot to attack after. This ended up paying off, and we land an attack for 61 damage. This really helped this fight. On the next turn, I switched to Extinguish to heal him and land an attack. I knew Dr. K was going to use a shield, so I took this time to heal my robot. We also added 17 damage to Cubix, lowering his health down to a range that we could knock him out. On the next turn, I went with a defensive attack because I figured I would miss. I missed, and we took an attack, but it was only for 6 damage. This was a great time for me to use this. On the next turn, I defended again so I wouldn't take as much damage, and it worked out. I only took 12 damage. Looking back at this though, I should have used my invert wheel chip because the chances of him landing the attack was super high, and it could have switched around for me. He missed his next attack, and I scored a hit for 69 damage, but since he healed a bit last turn, he was still alive. I need to land my next attack to win the fight. Of course, I missed my next attack, and he hit Extinguish for 12 damage. Extinguish had 13 health, so he survived with 1 HP. This was super close to losing another robot. I knew that he was going to use double damage on the next turn. I used my invert wheel to force him to miss the attack, and we hit Cubix with an attack doing 61 damage, ending the fight. We won! After the fight, we get another cutscene showing that the Negatizer was broken, and Cubix is our friend again. Dr. K freaks out and tells us that he'll show us, and then we have to fight his last robot called Colossal. Colossal is made up of 3 parts like all the bosses, but his sections are made up of electric, fire, and power. It's a change from all the other bosses, so I was all for this. I decided to take Cubix's last form, Cubix Plus, for this fight. It's his electric form, Soix again, and Extinguish again. Those being my picks because of how strong their attacks are at this point in the game. On our first turn, we land our attack on the electric section for 15 damage, taking out most of its health on the first turn. If this fight plays out like this, then it shouldn't be a problem. On the next turn, we land the wheel on a successful attack, but he used an invert wheel on us, so we took a hit for 14 damage. Not that bad, but it was unfortunate for us to take that so early in the fight. On the next turn, Dr. K is successful on his attack. We healed before the turn, and then he attacked us with his fire section, which wasn't effective against our electric section, So even with double damage, he only did 14. That's crazy. This was the luck we needed on that turn, though. On the next turn, he lands a hit again, and there wasn't anything I could do about it, so we took huge damage, and we lost our first robot, Cubix. Now we're in trouble because we're down a robot. He also healed the damage we did on the electric section, so he's back to full health. The next turn, we got super lucky that he missed because he used double damage again. And with the debut of Cubix Plus, we land a huge hit for 75 damage on the electric section, taking it out of the fight. It is now 2-on-2. We land our next attack for 38 damage on the power section, and we're turning this fight into our favor now. I wasn't sure what I should do at this point, so I thought keeping Cubix Plus in was our best choice. The very next turn, he uses another invert wheel chip. We ended up landing our attack on the blue, so it switched around and he was able to attack us. We didn't take much damage though, only 7, so it wasn't that big of a deal. On the next turn, we went defensive with Extinguish and only took 7 damage again. He wasn't hitting us hard, so I figured we were still in great shape for this fight. Next turn, we went with the same strategy. He landed the hit, but this time he only did 5 damage. If he attacks like this, he has no chance to beat us. On the next turn, he wasted his double damage because he missed, and we got to counter with an attack doing 51 damage, taking a huge chunk of the fire section's health. We're now on the offensive, so we should be able to take out one of the sections on our next turn. On our next turn, I used our double damage chip, and I was really close to not landing the attack, but we ended up being successful, and I was able to take the power section out with an attack that did 74 damage. Down to one more section, and we beat the final boss. We miss our next attack, but he only counters with an attack that does 3 damage. This is laughable at this point. I used a shield on the next turn just to be safe, and he does another attack that only does 3 damage. I love that after each attack, Connor is so worried about it, even though it's doing nothing to us. He gets lucky again on the next turn and is able to land another attack, but this is chip damage and nothing to worry about. Even without a shield, we only ended up taking 7 damage, because fire just isn't effective against electricity. The next attack he misses, so we get to counter with an attack for 56 damage, ending the fight. I also stole the health from this section to get Cubix Plus back to full health, and then we won the fight. The funniest thing about this fight is that it seemed easier than some of the other boss fights in this game. I don't know how that happened, but we didn't struggle in this fight like at all. After the fight, we get a cutscene where Dr. K and Colossal fly away from the scrapyard. I guess he just leaves. Then we talk about how we saved the town, saved all the robots. Mong makes a joke about how he wants donuts now that the town is saved. Hella calls us and lets us know that everything is under control, and that our teamwork helped us save the day. Then the credits roll, and we finish the game. Would I recommend this game? I think I would recommend this one. The voice acting isn't good, and the game aged graphically pretty bad, but the game is fun. The battle system is unique, and collecting all the robots was enjoyable. I would say that this was fun and pretty short too. But let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you want to know what's next, stick around, but if not, thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this video, and we'll see you in the next one. We got our GameCube list up. We got 517 left on the list. And on the count of 3, we're going to find out what we're playing next. So 3, 2, 1. 234, which is Mario Kart Double Dash. That's a really good one. So Mario Kart Double Dash will be what's next.